For a second time, tech firm Samsung has made headlines for all the wrong reasons. The company has pushed back this week's planned public launch of its highly anticipated folding phone, the Galaxy Fold, after reports that reviewers' phones were breaking.
It's not the first time the company has had a disastrous rollout of a new phone after the Galaxy Note 7 batteries exploded and caught fire in 2016. For more, we're joined in the studio by Chris Griffith, technology journalist at The Australian. Chris, why is this happening? This should be the sort of thing, a breaking phone, that should be sorted out before it's released to the public, to the media particularly.
Yeah, well, I think it is a bit of history repeating itself. Of course, it's totally different from the battery scenario. But in both cases, Samsung was really trying to get something to market very, very quickly ahead of a competitor. In 2016, they released the Note 7 in August. Apple was about to bring out the iPhone 7, iPhone 7 Plus the following month. And they were really trying to get their stuff into market first. Now, the same applies here. Huawei, the Chinese company, have got a folding phone called the Mate X. And there's a belief, and I think it's quite credible, they're trying to get this really quickly into the US market in particular and the China market ahead of Huawei, because, you know, first into the market
is it that lucrative? The first into the market means you get a foothold and the consumer stays with you beyond? Is that?
I think it's a fair factor. Contrary to that, though, is the fact whether a lot of people are going to buy this phone anyway, because it is a bit of an oddball phone, in my view.
OK, what was happening then? What was the folding failure?
Well, the failure was they gave a few of these phones to some of the US journalists at The Verge, Bloomberg, CNBC, and they reported things like a tear in the hinge, the folding hinge, the screen was bulging, and there was a thin layer of plastic on top that some of those journalists thought was actually a screen protector, and they kind of wrenched this off. It was actually part of the necessary technology. So
it's so absurd as to be hilarious. Really.
It really is.
I do.
And so there was this Twitter hashtag Peelgate was what, you know... so it is comic.
So some of these reviewers were literally ripping off the face of the phone.
They thought it was just one of those screen protectors that you put on your phone, but it was actually the top layer, the top plastic layer. So no wonder the phone kind of, you know, stopped working.
On a serious note, I mean, this is so damaging to the company, particularly after the fire. I mean, can it recover? Can it now come back and say, no, sort it all out, here we are, have one of our foldable phones?
I think they can, because Samsung is such an enormous company. I mean, we talk about Apple and phones and that, but remember, Samsung are into everything from air conditioners to fridges to TVs to, you know, mining. They've got a whole division of mining that operates here in this country as well. So they're enormous, so they can take these bumps. But in my view, it's where competition, you know, the idea of competing becomes so strong that you take shortcuts a little bit and get things into market when they're not really ready to go to market.
How have Huawei, and there's another company called Royole, I think.
That's right. How
have they fared with the folding phone?
Well, Royale's a small Chinese company, and it wanted to be the first to market. So it produced its Royale Flex Pi, I think it's called, late last year. And it's a folding phone with a kind of gentle hinge, and it kind of worked, and nothing as dramatically problematic as with Samsung. But it wasn't all that brilliant either in terms of the quality, the reports of the screen, and so on. The Huawei phone that I've tried, the Mate X, it's not bad. It's got a glossy screen. I didn't feel any need to peel anything off it. And it's really bright and that, but I've found that, you know, pressing on it, it wasn't as sensitive as it should be, and sometimes I had to press multiple times, as you might see in our review of it.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's all very pretty and it's all very innovative and all that kind of thing. Does the market actually want a phone that folds? I mean, do people actually care? I mean, I think people would seem to sort of much rather a phone that didn't break at the smallest drop, you know?
Well, I think to answer that, I think the market wants it, but the public may not. I think the market wants this big adrenaline sort of injection into it, because at the moment, people are holding on to their existing phones much longer. I mean, phones of 2016...
Because they're so expensive.
Yeah, they're so expensive, but also the phones of a couple of years ago do more than what most people really need from phones. It's really, you know, around the edges, particularly around the cameras, in dark, night photography, zoom photography, that there's improvements. But I think for most people, they're really happy with something, say, around 2016, and those phones will last 3 years. So the market is looking for something new, and we're in the era this year of the foldable and the foldable and the rollable. The rollable TVs from LG that we saw at the start of the year was sort of like one of those old-fashioned blinds.
Looking at those pictures there of it folding in, does it matter which way it folds? There's foldable, altable and downable, and then does that affect how you view pages? I mean, I'm thinking if you go onto Facebook, does that mean your Facebook is squeezed that way or that way? I mean, how does it adjust?
I wrote a whole piece around whether you fold in or out. Now, Samsung's fold outwards, so the screen remains, inwards, so the screen is actually concealed, and so they have to put another screen on the outside if you want to use it as a phone. Whereas Huawei's done the opposite; it folds outwards, so your screen becomes two screens, and you can use that for, as a normal phone or for taking selfies and so on.
How will this go down with other phone manufacturers like Apple? How will they be viewing these developments in terms of, a warning about how you test your products before you hit the market, how you reach out for perhaps independent testing of these products, and the pace at which you kind of hit the market?
Well, I think, Jeremy, Apple is the opposite. It's a pretty cautious company. I mean, occasionally it's got things wrong, but you might remember recently they had a special wireless charging device that they announced that they were not going to bring to market because their initial testing of it showed that it wasn't really up to speed, and they withdrew it before it ever came to market. Now, we don't tend to see that from a company like Samsung, which is, it produces a lot of really good things, but it likes to get things in there really quickly. How will others view it? Well, for Huawei, they might decide they might try and pip Apple to the post and bring their release a bit forward if they can.
So they won't get skittish by something like this and the potential damage it might cause going to the market prematurely, perhaps?
I think they'll be more careful. I don't think Huawei tends to be quite as I wasn't going to say reckless, but quite as fast as wanting to get things in there. But I think they'll take on the cautionary tale as the manufacturers did back in 2016.
A hiccup then. So have they announced a new launch date of what we might be expected to pay for one of these foldables?
Well, we know in the US market that you'll be paying like $2,000
for just the phone?
For the Fold. And for the Mate 10, Mate X, it's like $2,600. So you'd be looking maybe towards $3,000 in Australia and $4,000. So when I spent some time with Huawei, they admitted that really it's going to be, either the tech nerds like me or whatever, or people who like to buy things just new in the market that are likely to pick it up. Because I think the other thing is the use case really isn't strong about these particular phones. When I used my Mate X, it was great for browsing because a browser you could sort of scroll up from the bottom. But when you look at video on it, our landscape video on a square screen, you just had really big black bars at the top and bottom. It wasn't really an immersive experience at all. I suppose it might work with Instagram because Instagram has square photos, for example, and there is a bit of a culture around being able to make square movies. I don't know by whom, but I don't know if the use case is so strong because when I'm out and about, I've learned over the years to be able to use a normal phone for the things I really need to do on the go. And if I know that I'm going to be stopping somewhere, I might take a little tablet like an iPad mini or something like that. I can do without having the instant fix of a slightly larger 8-inch screen. It's not all that big. 8 inches is not huge by any means.
Chris Griffith, it's good to have you on the program. Thank you so much for joining us.